Alright, welcome back to More Than Peachy's Gaming. I'm your host, Mune, and here we are once again having a good conversation. This is very much a different type of video, one that I was kind of wholeheartedly hoping that I wouldn't have to actually make a video of ever. But here we are. So, this video is in response to Sony's recent uh, announcement about them getting rid of physical disc in January of 2028. I know it's still about a year and a half away until something like that happens, but I'm hoping that this video ages poorly and they backtrack. But let's kind of dig in a little bit about what's going on here. Um, there's honestly a lot of fundamental flaws with this decision and why people are upset or will become upset when they realize what has happened. And I'm just going to kind of go over a brief kind of overview of some of the things that I observed. The first thing I want to cover here is that there is this perception of owning versus a limited time access to media. Okay? That means if you have a streaming service of like Netflix and you see a movie, you have a limited time access to that because it is a streaming platform. Okay. Likewise, if you go out and buy the movie on DVD or Blu-ray, those are two different things. Okay. One is actually owning it. Nobody's going to come into your house, take your movie, uh, and say you can't watch it because this was a limited thing uh, versus a limited time access thing where Netflix can pull down things pretty much with or without warning. Okay. And in the scope of things, this goes a long way. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But in the grand scheme of it, if it is, if we don't actually have something to physically own, then is it really owning when you buy something digital? And that's kind of the big argument here is there's this argument that if you buy something digital, you don't actually own it. You're buying a license or a temporary thing. Versus when you buy a physical thing, it's supposed to work pretty much indefinitely. Um, but let's get to the next point I want to get to, which leads into the history of the digital option and digital only options for uh, games and media. Uh, I brought up Netflix. Netflix is a really good example. There are things that are on Netflix that have no physical release. Okay. Likewise, there are video games that do not have physical releases. And there's a lot of history behind that, a lot of choices because some companies that make games want them on particular platforms. And if you want to release them on PC, you typically have to have a digital only game. I mean, you can make it for other platforms, but you're not making a physical one for uh, PC as often because it tends to be uh, not as easily accessible at that point. That's not to say there have never been digital games for PC because there have been. But with the advent of Steam, they kind of more or less give you that option. Uh, there's a lot of direction on this, and I'm going to touch base on this a little bit later, but kind of keep that in mind when we start talking about what these options are. And there are games that are made as a physical copy, but also available as a digital copy on multiple platforms. I like to point out things like Grand Theft Auto 5. Grand Theft Auto 5 is available on PlayStation 5 and even on the PlayStation 4 as a physical game, but you can also get it digitally. It is your choice on which one you want to get. Um, but I know some people are saying, hey, games are getting too big. That's the reason why we have digital options. And for the greater part of a decade, maybe a little bit more than that, games have been kind of switching over to a digital installation or a key to basically unlock games. Okay, to do away with the idea of having the entire game on the disc. Or if it is on the disc, you have to install it on your system and then get like an update so you can actually play the game. This has been kind of a weird sensation, and this goes across many different platforms. We saw it with like the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. I know we saw it newly with the Nintendo Switch. I'm not so sure about the Xbox One, uh, like Series S or X. I'm not really in the know of Xbox and their related matters. But the idea is that uh, we're using this device, this physical media, to basically gain access to digital media. And this has been really relevant in a lot of cases. I've seen things like Final Fantasy X-2, like Last Mission on like the Nintendo Switch, okay, here in North America, whereby if you would buy the game used, you would have to buy a digital copy or like DLC version of that, but you still have to have the game card in the system. It's really strange, okay? And we have things like that. Nintendo has game key cards. You have to have the thing in the system to make it run. Same thing with like on other systems. It's always a little bit strange in that sense. So it can't function on its own, but it also can't function all digitally that way. So it's strange, and it has been kind of the way games have been going because the media that these games are installed in just aren't big enough. Okay, they're having a tough time with it. Not just that, but like a lot of developers like to push out games. They have deadlines, and they need to make sure that their game is playable when people buy it. So that might be, hey, we're going to ship it in its incomplete form, and then we're going to do a patch to kind of fix it up, basically in post. So that is a history of that. Uh, but then I'm going to go back to the Steam argument here, okay? And why this is kind of all playing part of this, because I've heard a lot of comments. Well, Steam does it, why can't PlayStation? Well, there's a big reason. PC is a market, okay? It is definitely a market. However, Steam doesn't have a monopoly on PC games. You can get it from Steam, you can get it from any other uh, storefronts. You can get it from the company's exclusive website. Okay, they don't have a monopoly on games. Okay, they also don't see the most percentage of like taking money from the players and companies to deliver that. They don't necessarily control the prices on those games. Okay, I understand that Steam can sometimes dictate what's on their platform, but again, those uh, publishers can take their games elsewhere. I know there's like the Epic Game Store. Hey, that's competition to Steam. You know, you can buy it off of any number of websites that even just sell digital keys, or they have them up and available. I play a very fancy game. You guys probably have seen videos of me playing it, Genshin Impact. It's not available on Steam. At least as far as I know, it's not. Okay, I buy I got the game exactly from their website. No big deal. But that's also a game that's available on multiple platforms. You know, on other consoles. It's on the PS5. It used to be on the PS4. I think it's also on like the Xbox One Series X and S. Um, so there are options with that. Now, what makes this a really hard situation? Consoles are generally plug and play, okay? Which means you generally go out, you buy the system, you hook it up, you get your game, you pop it in, and it just works. You don't have to worry, hey, do I have the right specs? Do I have the right peripherals? Can my display handle it? Oh, do I have a graphics card? You don't have to worry about all that with a console because it's got everything built in. It is a dumbed down PC, as I would put it. Okay. Um, Now, the other part about that is the console also has a time limit because we go by generations. It could be as short as I think it's like 2 years, or as long as freaking what is it like 8, maybe even 10 years, where a console will have its life. Where games will be published on for that system, released on it, and that is what you play it on. That is the hardware. Generally, when those consoles come out, they have very few games. That's why a lot of companies try to rely on backwards compatibility. That's what led to the very big success of the PlayStation 2, and then later on the PlayStation 3. That's also what happened with the Xbox 360, Series X, and then we eventually also saw with the Nintendo Switch 2. Okay, so there are definitely options of that to try to build into that ecosystem. Uh, but each console is also a time generation until they get new hardware. And that's what the difference between those generations is the hardware. You generally get something a little bit more powerful. Okay? Which means eventually you're no longer going to be able to get new games from that older hardware. So it has been time tested time and again that eventually you have to get the new hardware to keep up. Okay. So this leads into a lot of problems, which leads us to the next argument about this is the loss of access. When you get new hardware, like a new console, you lose access. Okay. So that means if you have a Nintendo 64, you don't have access to your Super Nintendo games on your Nintendo 64. However, if you still own your Super Nintendo, you can still play your games that are on that system. Now, we're running into a digital age, okay, where if you don't actually have a physical copy of those games, it causes a little bit of an issue. And this has been a big issue with what Sony has been doing here recently. And I know it's not necessarily always under their control. They have a license that they then allow you to basically use. The problem with this is that they call it purchasing, okay? And you're buying something. And they use all the termage and verbiage of an actual you pay money for something, you own it, okay? They don't say, hey, you don't actually own this, and we can take it away at any time. Um, and you can lose access through different means. I've seen people buy like a game digitally on the PlayStation Store, and then their PlayStation Network account gets banned. Well, if the game was strictly online, then you just lost access to your game. Additionally, if a storefront goes down, which all storefronts will go down eventually on consoles, you may no longer be able to purchase those games. Additionally, it means that if they can pull access away, saying, hey, they no longer have a license agreement for this console, they can pull your games. You can literally be left without a game. Okay. And in some cases, you can't even re-download it. Okay. And I know this has been kind of a weird mentality. People are like, oh, yeah, I can always go back and re-download it. How long do you think these companies are going to keep these services up and going? You know, at what point does it become less cost effective to actually keep them up, to let somebody have access to the games? And I know some people are like, well, PlayStation 3, that store, I mean, it went up in 2006. Well, so did the Wii store, their network. And you never hear anybody talking about, hey, when they shut that down a long time ago. I think the Switch 1 came out and they shut that thing down. I think that's roughly about the timeline. But because there's the loss of access for these games, uh, there may be additional problems with it. I personally have a uh, PlayStation 3, and years ago, this is one of the problems that I ran into. I bought a PlayStation 1 Classic game off of their PlayStation Store, and I hadn't been playing my system for a few years, and uh, I didn't load up the game, but I played the system, and went I went to go load it up. I haven't loaded it up in a while, and the game said that I had to connect to the internet to verify my license. I was really skeptical. I'm like, wait, because I wasn't connected to the internet at the moment when that happened. I was like, well, that's strange. I had to sign into the PlayStation Network and verify my license. It was no big deal. This was some time ago. This was like 2019. But I still had to go through that check for a digital game, which means that it has to do a verification of that media, even though it was bought for and installed onto the system without anything attached to it. There wasn't any PlayStation Plus. There wasn't any like super discount. I didn't get the game for free. It it wasn't even like nothing was attached to it. Okay, and I had to do this for a few of my games. I was not very happy about it. I was like, well, this is going to be a problem. But because of that loss of access, it also means that we also run into the problem of potential loss of artifacts. Okay? An artifact is basically proving something existed in one form or another. And if you can no longer download the game, you can no longer load up the game for whatever reason, you might as well say it never even existed in the first place. Okay? Because how are you going to prove it otherwise? You can't load it up. You can't prove it actually existed other than somebody documenting it. But then at that point, you're like making it up, you know? And that's really hard to prove that something existed when you can't show them in some kind of proof. Okay? And the, at first you might even think about this, hey, I don't really care about this. This is dumb. Why do we even care about this at all? Because honestly, digital is the way of the future. Yes and no. There are going to be some problems, okay? And you might not see this coming, okay? The reason why this is such a big deal is because it's going to hit Sony right where it counts, right in the pocketbook. And the single most reason why is because who buys the games? And how do they get their games? Okay? Now, me, I buy games off of Steam. I buy games physically, digitally. It doesn't really matter to me. Okay, not as much. I'm still buying in different waves. I'd rather have physical rather than digital, but sometimes that's just not possible or has a longevity of doing that. But the sales themselves will reflect this. In particular, especially during the holiday season. Okay, because a lot of people buy physical games. But the reality is, some people buy for others. Okay, I'm talking like parents, grandparents, friends, other relatives. They buy gifts for other people. And when you buy a gift for another person, you generally want to wrap it. I'm pretty sure people remember the videos while they're growing up or have seen videos from like the 80s, the 90s, and even the early 2000s of when somebody's like, oh, they opened up a present during like Christmas or their birthday and it was a video game. And they're like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Oh my God, I always wanted this. That's going to be a thing of the past if we get rid of these physical copies, which means some people won't buy their kids' games anymore or their relatives' games because some people like to go to the physical store. If they can't hold it and they can't wrap it, they're not getting it as a gift. They're not giving it to anybody. So that's one of the bigger problems here. So there are a lot more other cases here. I'm just going to go over blasting through a few pros and cons that I came up with, just kind of reflecting on this. Okay. The pros of going digital only are you have quicker access to your games. You have less waste. That means you don't have plastic, you don't have the disc, you don't have potential, trash involved with it. Okay. You have potential for higher revenue because you no longer have to do things like ship your games. You don't have to use middlemen like game stores. You don't have to spend money to have factories make your games. You don't have the materials to make those games. Okay? Which means that you have lower cost for this entire endeavor. And then there's no need for two versions of a console at that point, too. Think of when we have the PlayStation 5, the disc version and the digital version. You don't have to have one for each. Now, if you want to have a lot of things, like you're probably going to still need a bigger hard drive. So that's one thing I want to put there. Going hand in hand with that lower cost, the environmental impact on basically the world. You don't have as much waste. You don't have as much labor. So it's good in that sense. Okay. Uh, and this also brings potential interest in older physical games. Some people may want to go out and get those. They're no longer going to sit on used game store shelves because people that like physical games are probably going to be going out and looking for them more often then. The cons? There's no cheap option because, well, Sony doesn't have a competitor on their system. They have other consoles out there, but if you buy a PlayStation 6 and the only option is digital, and the only way to buy it is from the PlayStation Store, they have a monopoly on price. They get to choose what the games go for, or their publishers can, and they always will get their cut, no matter what. There's no sharing of games. You can't lend your digital game to a friend. That does just is not a thing, not right now. Okay, there's no secondhand market or used games. So you start to run into things like GameStop will no longer be selling used copies of any games. They might be able to sell you a digital code or a box with a code in it, but that's about it. Uh, there's no opening games during Christmas or holidays, and the loss of sales. Those are all going hand in hand. They have a heavy reliance on the internet. So if you have not so great of internet, or for whatever reason your internet goes out, you kind of have to have it to some degree. So if the internet goes out at your location because of like a storm, and it's out for 2 weeks, well, you can't play your games, and your games might need those check-ins. Okay, that's kind of the way that our world works right now. Uh, the potential loss of content where whenever Sony decides to take it away from you, as shown with movies on their platform. There's no proof that the game actually existed after they take it away from you. And not just that, but you can also get upset players, developers, who will more likely jump ship to another console or just a PC, depending on what they're wanting to do. And then obviously the higher hard drive requirements for those consoles that are digital only. Because, well, if all the games are digital, the hard drives for those consoles have to be larger to supplement those games. So, with all that said and done, I think those are the big points I want to point out to. Um, as the decision was made a few days ago, Sony still can backtrack on their decision, like Microsoft did more than a decade ago about the same thing. There are clear reasons to do this change, but there is a clear way to make the intent clear. At this point, PC is probably where digital gamers will migrate to, And physical may switch to Nintendo or Microsoft in hopes to have a physical future or simply refuse to buy digital only games. Uh, I mean, we're all in the boat together, and honestly, it's not a very pleasant boat. Uh, we want to have physical games to a degree, but what can we do? And what I would say, let it be known. You know, find an official Sony Facebook page or any of their other like social medias, heck, even their official YouTube, and comment. Say something to them. And if you believe that you need to vote with your wallet, maybe send a message. Don't buy their digital games. Buy their physical games instead. Or, you know, make videos out there saying, "Hey, I bought it from another, console or another platform like Steam," and say, "I'm supporting this because they support what I believe in." Okay? I want you to really think about that before you do that and give yourself a few minutes. Does the future of games meet your needs if this is going to go to digital only? Or do you want physical games to be around for decades to come? All right. Thanks for listening to me rant about this, but I feel like this is a really big story and there's a lot of information going out there. And I understand that Sony has kind of put themselves into this position. And as much as I really love to say it, they kind of shot themselves in the foot with this, not just because this is coming out of left field, but also because, what was it, more than 10 years ago when Microsoft made the decision about game sharing, they came out with their own video and they pushed for a physical future, and now we are here in 2026 debating this once again from the people who were against it are now for it. Strange how the world works. Anyway, thanks for watching.